Just a few days ago, Donald Trump fell below 40% in the poll averages. This is a big milestone for the politically obsessed, but does it actually even matter? You're probably thinking, what in the world is this guy talking about? Of course it matters that the president is unpopular. And to some extent, you're absolutely right. Trump being unpopular is good for Democrats. And I think we saw that in last week's elections. I'm not here to deny reality. But I am here to tell you that there's more to politics than the president's approval rating, and that if the Democratic Party wants to win and defeat not just Donald Trump, the man, but the entire noxious ideology that's grown up around him, we can't just count on falling approval numbers. But first, what's made Trump so unpopular recently? First things first, presidents tend to lose popularity over the course of their term. So some of this is just the so-called honeymoon period ending. But of course, Trump's also done plenty personally to make himself less popular. The recent government shutdown, the longest government shutdown in history, gave Trump's numbers a real beating. I think it's pretty clear from a political perspective, at least, that Democrats came out of that whole situation better than the Republicans. The shutdown also contributes to the general feeling of disorder and chaos in the second Trump term. This administration jumps from scandal to scandal like it's playing hopscotch. The second big thing that Trump's taken some hits on lately is the economy. To a great extent, Trump was elected on a promise to make things less expensive. This was always going to set him up for failure since his signature economic policy, tariffs, by definition, makes things more expensive. And of course, the most recent problem that Trump has had to deal with lately is a threat from the House of Representatives to release details on the Jeffrey Epstein case over his own objections and the objections of Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House. So this is the political playing field as I write this video. But what does it mean in practice? Trump going below 40% is an important milestone because the position from Democratic leadership has been that's how low Trump's approval needs to get before Republicans in Congress start breaking and working with Democrats.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about the Democrat strategy more broadly. Last month, you said in an interview that Trump will screw up.
Yes. He can't help himself.
Do you really think, though, that there's something that will move the needle for either Republican legislators or voters? I ask because that feels like a familiar argument against the president. Surely this will be the final straw for
there's no
for
final
someone.
straw. It's all the things he is doing. But let me say this. Last time he was president, which is the closest experience we have with him, admittedly, the world has changed some, particularly on the media side, how it works. We kept pushing and pushing and pushing and chipping away. And when he went below 40% in the polls, the Republican legislators started working with us. He was at 51. He's now at 48. We're going to keep at it until he goes below 40.
The theory here, in essence, is that Trump will inevitably become radioactive politically, which will make Republicans more likely to work with Democrats in Congress. Maybe some Republican defections will happen in some very key areas, like on the Epstein files situation, for example. Nothing's impossible. But I want to caution people from putting too much faith in the idea that what's going to get us out of this mess is a Republican Congress coming to its senses for a few reasons. First, there's some very real structural reasons why congressional Republicans are incentivized to never work with Democrats ever. And second, the mess we're in is fundamentally bigger than Trump. It's an entire ideology that needs to be confronted head on and defeated. And that's going to take more than one man's approval rating collapsing. In theory, every member of the House of Representatives is up for election every 2 years. 435 competitive Democratic elections all across the country, but also not really. Don't get me wrong, elections still happen technically, but because of things like gerrymandering, where district lines are drawn to favor one party over the other, the outcome is predetermined in all but a very small minority of congressional races. Cook Political Report scores each House race on how competitive it is, and of those 435 races, they think only 34 will actually be competitive in 2026. Of those 34 seats, only 16 are currently held by Republicans. In the Senate, 6 competitive seats will be up for election in 2026, and of those 6, only 3 are currently held by Republicans. I say all this just to be clear that when Democratic leadership talks about creating pressure on Republicans in swing districts, this isn't some massive contingent of the Republican Party we're talking about. It's a very, very small number of people. I think Chuck Schumer's insistence on the idea of Republicans eventually figuring out that they should work with Democrats maybe made more sense in the past. In the past, there used to be a lot more competitive seats in Congress. Over time, though, the number of competitive seats in Congress has steadily shrunk. The Brennan Center says we have fewer competitive seats today than at any time in the last 50 years. Unfortunately, such a small number of competitive seats means that the Schumer strategy of counting on swing district Republicans seeing Trump's unpopularity and deciding to work with Democrats in order to appear more moderate to voters is just less effective quantitatively than it used to be. There's less pressure to do that in 2025 than there was in 1995. Even if these Republicans in swing districts decided that they wanted to work with Democrats, they'd still have to deal with the fact that the people that vote in Republican primaries overwhelmingly are approving of what Trump is doing. Even in the most pessimistic polls for Trump's approval among Republicans, 74% of Republicans still approve of him, and that's a really low one. Other polls have that number in the 80s or even low 90s. The Republican primary electorate, whatever way you look at it, is still overwhelmingly on board with MAGA, which is important since those moderate members of Congress still have to win partisan primary elections in order to get to the general election in the first place. This fact of a Republican primary electorate that still overwhelmingly supports Trump is also why it's not a good bet to count on Republicans in safer seats opposing Trump for more principled reasons either. Just as an example, my Senator John Cornyn in Texas is a loyal Republican foot soldier. He's also a very important person in the Senate. And he's also currently facing a serious primary challenge from a man named Ken Paxton, whose main charge against Cornyn is that he's just not MAGA enough.
Senator John Cornyn turned his back on President Trump. John Cornyn supports amnesty and says Texans should just deal with millions of illegal aliens. Ken Paxton is the conservative fighter they couldn't cancel. As our next senator, Ken Paxton will cut our taxes, defend our borders, and eliminate all the woke programs John Cornyn funded.
In the House of Representatives, Thomas Massie has taken some stands against Trump in some very key areas, and for the trouble, Trump is backing a serious primary challenge against him in 2026. He might be able to survive because he has a very strong local brand. People know what they're getting whenever they vote for Massie, but not every member of Congress has that, and even the ones that do might prefer to have an easy election instead of dealing with a Trump-backed challenger trying to take their job. The last structural problem for the plan of waiting for congressional Republicans to decide to work with Democrats as a strategy for fighting the Trump administration is that there's just already been so many filtering events for people who actually cared about taking the kinds of principled stands against the administration that kind of strategy would require. Trump sent a mob to the Capitol on January 6th. He threatened the life of everyone who was serving in Congress at that time, and he still has loyalty from the Republicans in Congress. People who had problems with the direction the Republican Party was going have almost all been primaried or have retired. Barring something truly horrific, and who knows what'll come out of the Epstein files, I just don't see people who are still here in Congress taking a principled stand at this point, at least not until Trump enters the lame duck period of his presidency and other Republicans decide that they want to start running for president. So I don't think that we can count on Republicans in Congress to jump ship of their own accord in response to Trump's cratering approval numbers. There's just too many structural forces against that kind of thing. Too few swing seats, partisan primaries with a Republican base that still overwhelmingly supports Trump, and the fact that we've been through a decade of the Trump Republican Party at this point, filtering out anyone who's not willing to go along with the agenda. But even if none of that were true, I still question if it would be the right strategy. The one thing Trump's approval numbers absolutely matter for is that the lower they get, the worse Republicans will probably do in the upcoming midterm elections. The midterms in 2026 are going to be seen as a referendum on how Trump's second term is going. There's just no way around that fact. The only option we have if we want to stop this administration and all of its abuses isn't to get Republican congresspeople to reach across the aisle, to deign to work with Democrats. It's to beat them, to win those competitive seats in elections and take control of Congress back from the Republican Party. In an environment where the president is unpopular, why would we want to give those Republicans in swing districts even the option of appearing wishy-washy on Trump? Why would we want to allow them the chance to appear moderate? Every Republican, at the very least, will vote for a Republican to be Speaker of the House, for a Republican to lead the Senate, and they will support Republican nominees to the judiciary and to lead important parts of the government. Right now, the Republicans are stuck between a primary electorate that will not allow candidates to distance themselves from Trump because the primary electorate loves him, and the fact that Trump's approval rating is collapsing among everyone that's not a Republican diehard. Democrats need to take advantage of this. And this brings me to another thing that I was talking about at the beginning of this video, which is that the problem of Trump begins with Trump, but it's also bigger than him. Think of all the news we've seen lately about the rot that's grown within the Republican Party. The staffer class is filled with insanity. Their think tank and journalist class has been tearing itself apart over the question of whether or not they should allow open white supremacists to be part of the Republican coalition. And figures as big as Matt Walsh and J.D. Vance seem to be on the yes side of that question. Listen to practically any of the speeches that mainstream Republican figures have given at events associated with the National Conservatism Conference or the Claremont Institute.
Continental Army soldiers dying of frostbite at Valley Forge. The Pilgrims struggling to survive in the hard winter soil of Plymouth. The pioneers striking out from Missouri for the wild and dangerous frontier. The outnumbered Kentucky settlers repelling wave after wave of Indian war band attacks from beyond the stockade walls. All of them will be astonished to hear that they were only fighting for a proposition. They believed they were fighting for a nation, a homeland for themselves and their descendants. They fought, they bled, they struggled, they died for us. They built this country for us. America, in all its glory, is their gift to us, handed down across the generations. It belongs to us. It's our birthright. It's our heritage.
There's so many pieces of data that all point to the conclusion that the problem that this country faces is bigger than Trump. It's the dominant strain of professional right-wing politics in America. This is a serious danger, but the fact that Trump is the chosen vessel for this faction of the Republican Party also presents a unique opportunity for Democrats. No matter how much he lies about it, he is not allowed to run for a third term. And if he does manage to run for a third term, we're in a whole other world of problems, and I'll just cross that bridge whenever we get there. But let's live in this world for just a moment. If we continue on this trajectory, or even a trajectory remotely close to the one we're on right now, Trump is going to leave office monstrously unpopular. When Bush left office, he had around a 34% approval rating. We're within 10 of that already, and we're not even done with the first year. Maybe it'll be someone else. It doesn't really matter who it is. What matters is that they're going to try pitching the exact same reactionary agenda without the Trump label. Democrats need to get ahead of this by making the point that there is no version of the NatCon ideology that doesn't end this way. The cruelty, the chaos, the corruption, it's inherent to an ideology that is at odds with liberal values like basic human equality, freedom, and a government of, by, and for the people. Of course, though, opposition is only going to take us so far. We have to displace their noxious ideology with our own positive vision for the future. One of the things that I'm trying to do here with this channel is create a space for that kind of reinvigoration. Watch this video I made about what's wrong with modern liberalism if you want a clearer idea of what I mean by that. I won't pretend that I have all the answers, but I think one small but concrete step we can take is building a community of people who feel similarly, which is why I'm starting a Discord channel. I'll put a link to that in the pinned comment. The elections last week gave us something of a preview of a winning message that's both pro-affordability and anti the authoritarianism we're seeing from the Trump administration. I think that's a great start. Trump cannot defy gravity. He's unpopular. His party got clobbered in last week's elections, and every day brings a new scandal. All of this is true. At the same time, though, Trump merely being unpopular is necessary, but not sufficient to bring the change that this country needs. Congressional Republicans just have too many structural factors that prevent them from abandoning him, barring total disaster. And in any case, the problem is bigger than Trump anyway. It's the entire reactionary ideology that needs to be just rooted out. Thanks so much for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment telling me what you thought about the video. Thank you so much to my channel members. I really appreciate you. You make this possible. If you'd like to become a channel member and get your own name in the credits, you can hit the join button on this video. See you in the next one.